Happy Tuesday, everybody. It is GC Live Talking Tuesday, October 25th. South Carolina is ranked for the first time in a couple of years, but they are also on their longest winning streak in nearly a decade. A good one over the weekend for South Carolina. We can talk about that, but definitely want to look ahead as they get ready for a game against Missouri, a team that, look, on paper, the Gamecocks shouldn't have an issue with them. But at the same time, too, this Missouri team, some of the losses they've had this season, 3 of them actually, have been decided by less than 7 points. And the defensive struggle that I feel like South Carolina could be walking into is an interesting one, considering the fact of what we've seen from the offense in the first half from some of these games this season, even in the Kentucky game. And then, of course, this weekend against Texas A&M, needing to find ways to improve on starting a little bit quicker. Again, it feels like we're beating a dead horse at this point, talking about the offense and discussing about, okay, scheme, offensive coordinator, whatever. Bottom line is this is where they are right now. They're 5-2, okay? There's some things, though, that I do like with the offense. There's some things that I don't like with the offense. I do feel like this is a week, though, to be able to take steps in the right direction in terms of trying to just get something going early in these games. Last 2 games, Kentucky, A&M, the second half, I have liked the play calling. I've liked the execution more than anything. I felt like there's been some execution issues from South Carolina this year from an offensive standpoint. I thought that was the case a little bit in the A&M game. I did feel at times they got away from the run early, which, as we've talked about ad nauseum, this is a team that needs to be able to run the football. They just need to. And that's not saying that Spencer Rattler doesn't have a good arm. It's just the way the makeup of this offensive scheme is in the skill players that they do have. So we can sit here and look, you can listen to whoever the hell you want, and they can tell you, okay, they should spread the ball around, this and that. No, it's just not who they are. It's just not. Sorry. Stop living in a fantasy world. It's just not. We're 7 games into the season. It's just not going to happen. It's just not. So they need to be able to continue to find ways to run the football, but to be able to have success in the run game to continue to open up the passing game. I feel like I say this every week. That Rattler is at his best when he's outside of the pocket, when it's designed, when it's designed. And not being able to run the football because A&M respected your run game. A&M respected your run game to the point where they brought an extra guy down the box. And I felt like that was one of the reasons why South Carolina got away from the run game early against A&M. You need to be able to find ways to use your extension of the run game, whether that be slants, whether that be short passes, whether it be whatever the case may be, swing passes. You need to be able to have an extension of the run game. And I felt like South Carolina didn't do that early on. So look, I'm not going to sit here and just do, sunshine and rainbows, because at the end of the day, everything's great. We did that Saturday night. But much like how I'm talking right now is how the team needs to approach this weekend. Everything was great last week. It was awesome. It's been awesome. I mean, shoot, you haven't lost the game in over a month. These are the situations that we've talked about, even going back to last week, right? That South Carolina has been in situations like this over the last couple of years, a couple times. Whether it be from a rank standpoint or on the outside looking in, where they're trying to take that next step. And that's the game where they come out flat. That's where they're getting caught up, the cliche, reading the press clippings. I don't know how many freaking 18, 19, 20-year-olds are reading the newspaper anymore. So probably more, what's on Twitter. They need to make sure that this isn't the letdown this week. Again, Missouri, on paper, you should beat them. But they're also a very, very stingy defense. Very. And I think that this is going to be a good matchup for South Carolina. I don't think this is going to be a cakewalk. They found a way to beat Vandy, the Tigers that is, over the weekend, 17-14. They're a team that you're going to have to earn everything against them. And we can talk about special teams. We can talk about the defense doing what they did last week. That's great. Force turnovers. Find ways to get points off turnovers, which we saw again past weekend. But the offense needs to come out early, and they need to start clicking. I'm going to add intern Joe into this, start going to the comments over here as we get things rolling. Lady Bree, we were a little held up. I don't know how much sleep we've really had. You can probably tell in my voice. I flew back in yesterday morning from South Carolina after being down there for the game. Did the post game show down there. Did a couple of the Gamecock Central stories. Flew back first thing yesterday, and then went to Foxborough, which typically is like a 50-minute drive. That took like 2.5 hours because of just how brutal the traffic was for Monday Night Football. And then we had a chance to run into Dante Reno, which I think we played it off like it was like, oh, gee, you're here. No, Dante told me he was coming. And we'll play some of that clip for those of you that don't know what I'm talking about. But and we'll talk about some Monday Night Football jokes. I know you're wearing your Bears jersey after beating the Patriots last night. Still got the price tag on the back after picking that thing up today at Dick's Sporting Goods, I'm sure. Yeah, probably bought that jersey today. You're not a freaking fan, you bum. But yeah, it was great seeing Dante Reno, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the conversations that we had. Can even, kind of give you ideas of things that we talked about off record, but more so just the general big idea. Because I'm going to respect some of the conversations we had. But yeah, GC Live, more like GC late. I am. Okay. What did Brian Kelly say? Put $10 in the jar when he's late. I am. I'm a man. Well, tell you what, because I'm running a little late, it was just a couple minutes. I think 5 minutes late. We'll stay on a little bit later tonight. How about that? Looking at more of these comments, and I'm going to get Joe involved as we kept going. John says, great win versus Texas A&M. Already looking forward to Saturday. As I go through some of these comments here, and I want you to, if you see any that stand out to you, Joe, let me know. Well, actually, let's just do that. Dude drops, PI's not called, killed us in the first half. I'll say this about some of the drops. I think this is, and it's not like there were like 80 drops, but there were a couple of drops. There were drops you should have had. Obviously, the Jalen Brooks touchdown, that one stung. And Jalen would be the first one to tell you that. Let's just use the Jalen Brooks one, for example. He's a Patriots fan, so he's a tough guy. He can handle it. Jalen catches that pass. Statistically, it changes everything in the first half. A play like that changes everything. It changes the way you look at how that offense was in the first half more compared to where it was, right? Home run play like that changes everything. Statistically, what it would do for Spencer Rattler's stat line. So I say stuff like that because we've seen this happen before. We've seen it with Xavier Legette a couple weeks ago. And boy, you can't feel happier for anyone in that locker room more than Legette to be able to have a play like that after what happened a couple weeks ago. And there were so many people that were writing him off. And you know what? Goes out there on special teams, which has become such a valuable part of this team. It's valuable for every team, Joe, but it's a valuable part for this team. And we've seen guys like Carryon Joyner, who played on 4 different special teams unit this past weekend, guys finding ways to impact this team other than just offense and defense. But yeah, I mean, look, those drops have certainly hurt South Carolina this year. And when you look at a team like Missouri, you look at a team like even Vandy, which I don't think is going to be necessarily as easy as some people think. Night game in Nashville. Some of those night games in Nashville have come down to the wire for USC, or they've been a rock fight. And then, of course, you're going to have Florida in the swamp, Tennessee, and then Clemson. The offense needs to find ways not to shoot themselves in the foot early in games more than anything. And if you can be able to help Rattler out, I think Rattler has looked better and better to me each week. I know that it hasn't been there sometimes from a full game standpoint, but he looks smarter with the football. I like his decision making. Sometimes they're missing. Sometimes that's on him. Sometimes that's on a receiver. Sometimes that could be the offensive coordinator too. I'm sure Marcus Satterfield would tell you that maybe there were times that he could have put him and the offense in better situations when he went back and watched the tape. But all in all, I do like what Rattler's doing, and I do like the idea of, hey, look, and I wish we had a crystal ball, Joe. to answer, what the hell do they need to do differently to get things going early? Because I do like what we've seen in these two pass games in the second half.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. And the run game is like we've talked about it. We've talked about it so many times that the run game opens up the playbook. And we saw that the run game got going in the first half. Marshawn and Juju, or Marshawn and CBS, excuse me, both got some touches, and like it all feeds off each other, and it all comes down to being comfortable for Spencer too. He's talked about it, when the run game gets going, everybody's a lot more comfortable. And you're right, Mike. We've seen a lot of progression out of Spencer, and what I'm thinking it is just the adjustment to playing in the SEC. Um, Now, and he has improved. He's looked a lot better outside the pocket and a lot more comfortable outside the pocket too, which is something we kind of expected him to have as much as we saw him mobile at Oklahoma. But, Mike, I think it comes down to just adjusting to the SEC. And also, Mike, you touched on it earlier, special teams were huge in that win. Josh Van was talking about how important it is. He said, just look at Pete Lembo, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's so invested. They have plays on all three facets. They go through it so much. And, Van was talking about how important special teams is to him because it's a chance for him to kind of, get the ball more, do something with it. And, especially on punt return, he said, I used to call a lot of fair catches. Now he's like, I see it as, my chance to make an impact. And I guess another funny little anecdote from his presser today was like, he's like, yeah, I got to tell the guys up front to stop blocking the punts so I can get a chance to make something happen. It was so funny. So, it really shows a testament to what this, special teams means. And Van and everyone who was asked about special teams today said they are leaning into the Beamer ball, stereotype and whatever. They're leaning into the tradition and the legend of it all. And it's definitely providing some juice that this team really needs when they can't necessarily score early. Like, Xavier Leggette's touchdown blew the roof off of Williams-Brice, and it was, it was just incredible, just quick play like that. And it's what the team really needed, and it's what the atmosphere really needed to kind of get going and really, give this team some faith going in, down the stretch there.
So I want to look at some of these comments. This one's from Cade, talking about how there were situations where South Carolina was behind the sticks, right? Second and long, brought in 12 personnel, stacked box, and they decided to run the football. I'll say this, though. I felt like USC got away from the run game early, in large part because A&M was stacking the box. And look, there's going to be times where you're not going to be able to run the football when there's guys that are stacked. But at the same time, too, if you're confident enough in your offensive ability, I'm not saying necessarily second and long, right? I mean, this is the situation that you brought up, Cade, but I'm just talking about in general and what we saw from them in the first quarter, especially. They got away from the run game. They got away from it. You can run the football when there's an extra guy down the box. It's just not going to be necessarily straight ahead all the time. And I think that's what we need to see from South Carolina is making those adjustments early in the game. They did that. They did that in the second half. You were able to see South Carolina run the football. And what changed? Well, it was just the way that they set plays up beforehand, whether it be, a little bit more screens, whether it be just quicker passes. I know some would like maybe to see more slants, get the ball out. It's that extension of the run game when you're not able to run the football or run it off tackle, get creative, the rollouts like we talked about, the play actions, the RPOs, everything that you need to be able to do to set up your passing game from the run. And I felt like South Carolina got away from it early on. And then at times, like Kate said, you could tell, and everyone could tell in the stadium when they were trying to run the football. You need to be able to stay balanced. And that's something that they have done a better job as the season's gone on. And in large part because they've had more success in the run game. We talked about before, first 3 games of the year, 211 yards combined. 211 yards combined. Those previous 3 games before last Saturday's game against Texas A&M, times 3 of that. Times 3. Over 600 yards rushing. So this past weekend, the run game got better as the game went on. South Carolina did a better job with it. It wasn't one of those things, though, that, it stood out in the same manner in which it did against, Charlotte or, SC State, right? But they were able to move the football. And I think the big thing now is you have to find ways to improve that in the first quarter. And that's something that we've been talking about all season long. But when you look at the slate that they have coming up, that's what it's going to come down to. I mean, Marshawn had 92 yards rushing. As a team, they had 118 yards. Felt like a lot of that came in the second half, though. Felt like a lot of that came in the second half. So it's not surprising that they were able to get things going a little bit more from an offensive standpoint in the second half once they were able to get that going. We got Cocky Talk on the line. Cocky Talk, thanks for calling in on GC Live Talking Tuesday nights.
How you doing, Mike? How you doing, intern?
Oh, man.
So, I got a lot of flack on Twitter, and I was talking about, I made a comment on Marshawn Lloyd's tweet Saturday, and early Sunday morning, and pretty much all I said was that, I feel like the majority of fan base wants Marcus Satterfield gone. And I guess that could be just coming from the people that I talk to, but, I try to interact with all corners of the fan base. Every corner, every perspective I try to get. And, it just hasn't looked good, honestly, man. And I know it sometimes it's Jimmy's and Joe's and not the X and O's, but, play calling is something that's got to get better. Marshawn Lloyd cannot start the game with 2 or 3 carries. That just don't make sense. That's not how we're going to win games. If we want to say, we come out of these press conferences and say, hey, we want to run the ball. We want to be a physical football team. But we give them 2 carries. It just don't make any sense to me. So I feel like majority of the fan base just really kind of want him gone, and they kind of want to see what somebody else can do, because he wasn't, honestly, Shane Beamer's first choice. Mike Bobo was.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think a lot of fan base see that, remember that, and like, well, he's just second picking, and they kind of want Shane Beamer to go out and do his due diligence and find a great offensive coordinator or a good offensive coordinator or up and coming, but not a retread, not somebody that was not even high on your list.
Well, and I think sometimes too, when you look at an offensive coordinator, it's kind of like just dating someone, right? Sometimes like dating someone, it might be one of those things where, you know what, they're a great person, they're a great girl, everything's great, but you just realize like it's just not a good fit. And over time you realize that. I'm not saying necessarily that is the case of where South Carolina is at right now. I'm sure a lot of people on the outside feel that way. There's times right now where I look at the offense and I'm like, why are they doing that? Why is it, third quarter, South Carolina is up by 10 and Rattler is back to pass? Why don't you hand the ball off to Lloyd? I mean, there's going to be moments like that. I think what the biggest problem is the lack of consistency to be able to find ways to overcome some of these same questions that we've had all season long. I do feel like, going back to the beginning of the season, that there were going to be, some struggles, right? There's going to be some growing pains. We've talked about that. And I know I got beat up for it because of some of the comments I said, more so as a team, but also on the offense, that it was going to take time for Rattler to develop a rapport with the offensive line and the timing of everything, right? And we have seen improvements. But coming off a bye week, just some of those concerns from an offensive standpoint, not saying that this is the worst offense in the world. I mean, shoot, as a team, and I know special teams plays a role in it and great field position and all that, but as a team, South Carolina is averaging over 30 points. They have not scored, I think, maybe once since the Spurrier era. They've averaged 30 points or more in a season. So they're doing things right now that they haven't done in quite some time. It's not all bad. It's just, this is a team that is starting to take steps forward in the right direction, right? 23 months ago, you're 2-5, don't have a head football coach. And now you're in a position where you're one win away from becoming bowl eligible before the end of October. So I think right now with South Carolina, you're doing good things, but at the same time too, and I think this is where a lot of the fan base is, it's great. I don't think anyone's upset with being 5-2. Maybe there's that one person that just, likes to yell at clouds. Okay, have fun with it. But I think a lot of the fan base's frustration is they see where South Carolina is and they know that there's still room for improvement, but it's not like it's just like these little things. They feel like it can be more. And as you continue to get better and what you want to see from the program, of course, whether it be this season, whether it be in the future, you want this thing to be clicking. And I think it's good and bad when you look at the offense and you say, hey, you know what? This team has not been able to put a full game together. Because it shows you like, hey, if they are able to get a full game together, if they are able to get the offense going early in the game, man, it could be a special product we see on that field on a Saturday. The problem is 7 weeks into this season, even going back to last season, it's just that consistency to overcome that early on. So, and I've said this before, I do like a lot of the things that Satterfield's doing. I don't think from an execution standpoint, it's sometimes there. I've talked to players and people close to the program. I've talked to people that are recruits that are seeing things, and they know things that are going on, talking to players inside the building. A lot of them just feel like they just need to execute more. Now, there's certainly times where they're saying, okay, why are we doing this or that? I mean, that's going to happen with any team on any level. But I do feel like early on in the game, especially this past week, and there were definitely times it was just like, why are you doing that? And, that would be something that I'd be interested to ask Marcus if I was at media availability on Wednesday, which unfortunately I'm not going to be. I'll be in New England. So maybe intern Joe can ask him is, just looking back at that A&M game, what were some of the things that you wanted to do differently to build on what you guys have done so far this season? And, what did A&M do that maybe slowed it down? And, maybe he's not going to give you the exact wording because you don't want to, show how everything's being cooked in the kitchen. But I think, look, ultimately, again, going back to the analogy, you can have a person you're dating, which is an awesome person. They are just awesome, but just sometimes it's not the right fit. Again, I'm not saying that's where South Carolina is right now. They're 5-2, but there's going to be people that feel that way. And that's how I think we got to wait and see how things play out. But bottom line is you're 5-2. Intern Joe, what you smirking at?
Nothing, man. The girlfriend references are killing me. But it's true, Mike. I mean, you're right. Marcus Satterfield, for all intents and purposes, is a great human being. And
well, put the human being stuff aside. I mean, Muschamp was a great person.
I was about to go.
But I say that because you talk with anybody. I mean, I've done some digging, especially being back up here in the college ranks and talking to people. A lot of people speak very highly about his football IQ. Again, we've seen a lot of good things. I know it sometimes gets masked when you feel like the consistency factor is not there, or there's a play call or two, and it's just like, what's going on? And the other factor is, too, look, you go look back at that Kentucky game. Going into that game, the Wildcats were ranked top 20 in the country from a defensive standpoint. It's kind of like the situation last night, if anyone was watching Monday Night Football. You had Mac Jones go out there to start, 2 series in, and what happens, right? The boos start coming down. So when you have people already in their mind saying, hey, look, I just can't do this. I can't watch this, or I disagree with this, that leash becomes shorter. Yeah. Fortunately for Shane Beamer, fortunately for this coaching, I should say, fortunately for Marcus Satterfield, it's not the fan base you have to worry about. It's the head coach. That's why I think, again, it's not about, okay, everything's all sunshine and rainbows. Like, let's not get that misconstrued here. I'm not saying that. There's flaws, okay? But I just feel like the offense isn't as bad as some people, I think, are having it made out to be, or to the point where it's just like, this is a team that's like 2-5 and the offense isn't doing anything. That's not the issue. The issue is this is a very good football team. Okay. They're a very good football team. People, and this is why I'm bringing this up so much. People want to see them take that next step. And I can understand that. That's why when I came on tonight, I wanted to start with that. Because going back down to South Carolina, talking with people down there, talking with fans too, just hearing people, okay? I understand where the frustration is. But I think it's important too to look at it and fully understand, like, okay, why aren't things working? And I think sometimes it can just be the fact that the offensive play calling at that time, it just wasn't the best time. Or some of the execution, which I've said multiple times this year, that going back and watching the All-22, which I haven't had a chance on this game, but I have on a good portion of the rest of the season, of the previous games, Satterfield has done some good things from an offensive standpoint. They just haven't executed it. Yeah. So, again, I bring all that up because sometimes you can have things that, okay, play caller knows what he's doing, this and that, but it's just not the right fit. That's why I'm bringing in that up, because if we continue to see South Carolina win games, I don't know if it'll be next year. I don't know. But you sometimes see situations like that where teams are good. And you just know that you have to find ways to take that next step, especially if you want to be a program that you feel like can compete in the SEC East. Obviously, Georgia's doing big things. Obviously, Tennessee's having a hell of a year. Okay? You're making progress this season. You're doing an awesome job this season and being able to build off of what you did last year, where it's not just smoke and mirrors. Everything that you pitched to your fan base, to the boosters, to this recruiting class and the recruiting class beyond 2023, you're starting to show them everything that you talked about. Now it's about continuing to find ways to be consistent in all three phases.
Yeah, like absolutely, I agree with everything that you said. And number two, I on the Satterfield situation, I think yeah, they didn't get a great start to this year, and yes, there have been some holes in the play calling. But you said it; they've been scoring and they've been winning recently, and so you can't necessarily dock what's been working. And now the run game, people could say like it's easy to just kind of hand the ball off or design a run, but some of these runs have been very systemic and very like designed to actually work for. I mean, the backs too. Because Marshawn Lloyd and CBS are, same backs, but also very, very, very different. And so you bring that up, Mike, and also too, like you kind of need a scapegoat for something. And like I said, there have been errors in the play calling and stuff like that. And I'm not calling out the fan base for calling out Satterfield or any of that, but you brought up the point too about execution. Like growing up in South Bend, I hate to bring up Notre Dame, but I've seen them win plenty of games where they haven't executed. And there's always the Brian Kelly quote that he's in favor of execution because his team didn't execute that night. But I mean, what it comes down to is winning football games. If they can continue to win football games and continue to put points on the board going downhill, I think, winning cures all, right, Mike? Like winning really does cure all. And there can be complaints with the play calling. And I saw the comment that brought up what Beamer said about, asking him to, get the playmakers the ball. And, the optics of that look worse than I guess what it is. Like they still won the game and whatnot. And I think it's really easy to kind of pick on somebody. And there always has to be a scapegoat too. There always needs to be somebody that, you can kind of point the finger at. And since Shane's not necessarily involved with the play calling, it immediately goes to Satterfield. And like I said, it's not necessarily unwarranted, but at the same time, I think, how poorly the play calling was and all of the things about Josh Fannin on the podcast and all of that stuff just created a bunch of, negative energy surrounding it. And, unfortunately for Satterfield, it's just kind of built up, but now he's kind of giving himself, a chance to, prove himself here.
I do want to look at some of these questions. Sherry, I don't fully agree with you on that. There certainly have been times this season, especially early on in the year, but I think more than anything, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but when you say fear, the first thing that comes to mind is just not having enough time. That's not the case anymore. That's not the case. I think, was it the first 3 games or first 2 games? I think South Carolina they allowed 9 sacks. I think there's been 5 sacks allowed since then, even during the Georgia game. So I think it was 9 sacks the first 2 games, and then there's been 5 since. So I bring that up just because, again, I'm kind of putting words in your mouth here because I'm trying to understand your question. So maybe you can, respond back to how I'm answering this. But I think Rattler looks more comfortable out there. I really do. Now, does he look like the Rattler that was at Oklahoma when he was a Big 12 freshman of the year? No. I do feel like defenses are better. I do feel like there's more athletic defensive players in the SEC. That's not to say there's not talented defensive players in the Big 12. Look, I mean, let's make that clear, okay? But I also do feel like it's just a different game. I also feel like, there are some things from an offensive standpoint that South Carolina is trying to figure out as to what works best for them. The team. It's not just about one player. Okay. It's not just about Rattler. The envision maybe when he got here, maybe was to, throw the football all over the yard or throw it a little bit more. I think I should put it. But as we saw in the first 2 games or 3 games, excuse me, there needed to be ways to get him a little bit more acclimated to the offense. And the best way to do that was being able to run the football. And as a result, what we've seen is Marshawn Lloyd has become one of the elite running backs in terms of being able to be a dual threat. He's very versatile, whether it be in the run game, whether it be in the passing game. I think if you really wanted to nitpick, I think, the only one thing you could probably say about his game that can get better is pass blocking. And I think if he can do that, he could have a very, very special career, not just here, but at the next level. So I bring all that up because when you're trying to figure out what works best for the team, there's going to be some growing pains. There's going to be some things that maybe it's not going to look like, okay, why isn't Rattler throwing the ball all over the yard? Well, the guy has a cannon. We know that. Okay. And this kind of goes back to another question I got asked, I think it was by Brian. Do y'all have the coaches' tapes? Do we have the wide receivers? Enough time to get out of their breaks? Again, did not see the all-22 from this past weekend, but going back and watching some of the tape on the all-22 or 22 view from earlier games this season, I've mentioned that multiple times here, which is there's been times that not just receivers, but, we say receivers could be tight ends as well. They need to do a better job of just being able to create separation. This is not anywhere close to this, but back in 2020, when South Carolina had obviously an awful year, and let's just put it as blunt as that. It's just a bad year. And that obviously resulted in Will Muschamp being fired. Shi Smith was the guy. When Shi Smith was being covered, the offense from a passing game standpoint was non-existent. Of course, Kevin Harris, he led the SEC in rushing yards. That was fantastic. Great. But when South Carolina fell behind, they needed other guys to step up because it became so easy. It was like a one-trick pony. If you took out Shi Smith, it was kind of like a youth basketball player that could only dribble with their right hand. You just stay on their right side, force them to go left. South Carolina had to dribble left, and guess what? They couldn't do it. Dribbling off their feet, going out of bounds. I mean, that's what it was like. It was like a youth basketball player having to dribble with their left hand. So I say that because there have been moments this year, again, earlier in the year, but there certainly have been still some moments. Can't speak really of this past Saturday's game until I go back and watch the all-22, that South Carolina needs to do better jobs could have done a better job of creating separation. Again, I'll have to go back and watch this past weekend's tape. It's tough to watch on the broadcast view. If you're watching on the broadcast view, it's really difficult to have an idea of what that looks like. Angles are all different. So I will go back and I'll give you guys a report on that. And if we don't have a chance to be able to meet again by the end of the week, we'll do it next Tuesday and be able to kind of air some of that stuff out there. But I think the offense, again, this isn't coming on here saying, fire this person, fire. It's not my job to say that. It's just not. When someone's not doing their job, and you can go back and, whether it be my time at Watch Fox, whether it be my early stages here at Gamecock Central, I'll look at back, you know what? Hey, they need to change something up. Where am I at right now with this offense? I just think they need to be able to make some tweaks because they have done some good things. And if they can get a full game together, if they can score early in a game from an offensive standpoint, right? Kickoff return for a touchdown this past weekend, interception leads to a field goal. Kentucky. Forced fumble on the first play of the game. Great field position. You run it in. That's not what I'm talking about when I say offense needs to find ways to start fast, because they've done that there, right? It's not the same, though. I'm talking about being able to drive down the length of the field and score in the first quarter. That's what I'm talking about. Sustaining a successful first quarter drive and then being able to carry that momentum into the second quarter. We mentioned it before last week. We've mentioned it over the last couple weeks, and it was true again this weekend. The Gamecocks were able to outscore their opponents in the first quarter. They are now 5-1 in the first quarter. Excuse me. They are now 5-1 under Shane Beamer against FBS teams this season and last season when they outscore their opponent in the first quarter. That's what they need to continue to do. And as great as special teams has been, and I know we saw the comment a little bit later about, Lembo, maybe he should be up for the assistant coach of the year, the Burroughs Award. Look, everything that he's done this year has been absolutely incredible. And if he's not on that list and not a finalist towards the end, it would be just an absolute disaster, crock of what, because he deserves it. And we're seeing the difference in the special teams. And I said this the other day. May have been on Sirius XM with Chris Dorian and Alyssa Lang this morning when I was on with them. South Carolina could easily be sitting here at 3-4 if it wasn't for their special teams. They don't block those 2 kicks against Georgia State. I don't know if they win that game. I really don't. With the way their offense was looking, I don't know if they win that game. This past weekend against Texas A&M, I don't think they win that game. There's been games this year where South Carolina might not win a game, not win some of these games if special teams doesn't make an impact. Kentucky, you could throw that in there as well. I know it didn't result in any points because there was a turnover after that punt block in the first quarter against the Wildcats. But these are the things that we're talking about. Kai Kroger playing out of his freaking mind. Averaged 49 yards a punt. Could have had another one down inside the 5-yard line. Darius Rush, who played out of his mind defensively, had an opportunity to catch it inside the 5 to down it, and it went through his hands. But that's the kind of stuff that we're talking about. Special teams, it's been incredible across the board. I also want to see, let's see, what's good, guys? Been a long time since I tuned in. It's been working crazy hours.
Let's go.
What you clapping over there, intern Joe?
Thanks for joining us, man.
Intern Joe's all fired up. Guy buys a beer shirt because the Patriots win. Patriots lost last night to Chicago, so he goes to Dick's Sporting Goods today and buys a beer shirt. You can see the price tag still on the back of him.
Bear down, baby. Bear down.
And, Lady Bree, I go back that far to T. I started watching Tenio. I do want to see, there was a question. Here it is. And I think this is a fair question. Okay.
Yeah.
How does this year feel different from 2017 with Muschamp's team? Really hope this season isn't fool's gold. This is where I think it's different. Okay. They're doing things that they haven't done in a long, long time. Okay. And I understand we could sit here, tick for tack, go down, okay, the schedule and compare to that schedule in 2017. But hear me out. You're on a 4-game winning streak. That hasn't happened in a decade. Okay. On top of that, you beat Kentucky at Kentucky. You haven't done that in a decade. You beat Texas A&M, something that had never been done in program history. But on top of all of that, what we're seeing is South Carolina is having an impact on special teams, which, like I said, they're starting to do things that a couple of years ago they weren't really capitalizing on. It's not that they were bad in special teams. I mean, shoot, you had Elliott Fry in 16, Parker White was still young in 17, but I'm talking about not just that season, but as a whole on the last couple of years before Beamer came here. But specifically looking at 17, there were things that you just weren't doing the same way. And I think with this team, they've helped themselves. It's elevated them to a point where they can come out a little bit slow offensively, like we saw against Kentucky, like we saw against Texas A&M, and yet they're still in these games. So I think, again, that's not to say that they can afford to play slow on offense. I mean, that's pretty much why I mentioned what I said to start the show off, is that they need to continue to find ways to avoid that. They keep getting better as the game goes on. And if they can find a way just to click offensively early on in these games, I mean, you want to talk about the fact that they have not been able to put a game together in terms of a full 60 minutes. Again, that stinks. But on the flip side of it, if you're looking at the glass half full, it goes to show you that, hey, you know what? If they can, what could this product look like? And if that happens this weekend, if that happens against Vanderbilt, if that happens in terms of being able to find some type of consistent rhythm over these next couple of weeks, going down to a difficult place to play at in Gainesville in a couple of weeks, we know it's on the other side of that. We know Tennessee's there. We know Clemson's there. And there'll be a point in time to be able to talk about that. Tonight, that's not the place we're going to talk about. We're not going to waste our time talking about the what ifs and this and that. Bottom line is this. You have to find a way to win this weekend. And I feel like against A&M, in trying to bring it back to how's this different from 17, and honestly, only time will tell. We'll have to wait until we see how this season plays out. The biggest thing I feel like that is different with this team in comparison to the last couple seasons, especially towards the end of the Muschamp era. And Joe, this is where I want you to weigh in, and I'll try to do my best to catch up with some of the questions and comments that people are submitting in. I apologize, guys, that we haven't been moving as quickly as we typically have in the past with some of these. But one thing that I do want to bring up is, and Joe, tell me what you think about this.
Yeah.
In the past, I feel like with South Carolina, a game like A&M the other night, when you jumped out to a 17-0 lead?
Yep.
And A&M started to creep back in. There were probably a lot of people in that building that said, oh, here we go again. Here we go again. I can tell you that this goes back to I think back to when I was playing in college. Players feel that. Players sense that. They might not say that at the podium. Oh, they're not going to tell you that. They can sense that. That's a real thing. So when you're talking about culture and just trying to change things and what's different now compared to then, I don't feel like that's the sense on the sideline anymore. I feel like players truly believe that they can get the job done. And being able to have a game like that against A&M and being able to get the W, was it pretty? No, it was not pretty. I mean, shoot, it came down to the freaking final play of the game, which it should have never. I mean, 2 plays for crying out loud. A&M had opportunities after, let's just call it for what it is. It was just a beautiful onside kick. They executed that to a T. That thing took maybe the perfect hop. I mean, the most that hop, Joe, I don't think I've ever seen a ball hop like that at Williams-Brice, especially in October, for crying out loud. That ground's a little bit harder then. It was a cold night the other night. But the point being is, I think they're starting to learn that, hey, we can do this. It's not this, here we go again. Nope, here we're going to. So, and they've done this a couple times. They did that against Kentucky. They did that, of course, this past weekend. I think that's the biggest difference I've noticed.
Yeah, Mike, there's belief in this building, right? We talk about culture. We talk about the sunglasses. This team is so bought in. It's ridiculous. And, you know, I was also part of the people that said, oh, here we go again. I was worried because it's an early lead, and we've seen what South Carolina does with early leads. But, Mike, I think it really is the belief, the buy-in, this culture. It's really showing, right? It's really paying off for what Beamer has built and all this energy behind the sunglasses, Justin King, and team culture. That is how they are winning these games, Mike. That is how they're winning these games. It's all about belief, and it's all about buy-in. And even if they were down, say 14-0, I feel like this team still would have believed that they were still in the game, no matter, you know, how much they were down by early on, because they knew that going into this game that they could win. They knew it was a winnable game, especially at home, and they understood, you know, the atmosphere at Williams-Brice with the State Fair and night game, and they knew how big this game was. And from what everyone's told us today is that, like, there is so much belief in this building and so much belief in each other, which is something since I've started watching South Carolina football, I didn't necessarily see that on Will Muschamp's team. Yep. I didn't necessarily see that the last couple of years. So
I do want to see this comment. And Michael, I'm not saying that you were directing it at me. If you are, I mean, oh well. You know, about people being negative. I'm bringing this up, and again, it might not be directed at me. I'm going to answer your other question after. This team, I mean, shoot, before the season, I had them going 8-4 in the regular season. And when they were 1-2, when we were doing these shows every week, and I kept telling everyone, be patient, be patient. They're going to turn things around. Be patient. I mean, we took a beating on here. 4 weeks later, 5 weeks, because there was a bye in there. Yeah. Look where they are right now. Mm-hmm. And this is what I figured it would happen. Now, things aren't, you know, there's room for improvement. And if we want to do a show each week, I'm not going to be like some of these shows out there that's just, you know, bashing this. And I'm not going to do that. I'm not. Okay. I'm up here in Boston. I have to deal enough with that with the Patriots. Okay. Right now. So I think what the important part is this: South Carolina is winning. Everyone loves winning. Dante Reno, talking with him last night, he loves winning. I think what we do now is, instead of doing a show each week where it's just blowing rainbows up people's asses and saying how great everything is, I think it's trying to dissect where they can be better. And for South Carolina, I think it's a perfect time to talk about that, because going into this game against Missouri, for the majority of the players on this team, they have never been in a situation where they're going into a game ranked. How do they handle that? How do they handle with the whole freaking world? I say world, you know, but more so the Columbia, but SEC Network talking about them maybe a little bit more, right? I know Gamecock fans sometimes feel they don't get enough love on the SEC Network. They're getting love today. Started this morning on the radio show, and I hopped on. You know, they only call me when things are going well in Columbia. I can tell you that much. So, you know, how do they handle that? Brad Johnson, guys like Eric Douglas. Unless you're a super senior, you don't remember what it's like to be ranked. You don't remember what it's like to be ranked or having to handle success. Spencer Rattler, yeah, he had success at Oklahoma. Those Sooner teams had success as a team. It's different, though. You're in Columbia. You're in South Carolina. And that's not to say that, you know, pressure cooker comparison or anything like that. It's just like, no, this is different. Okay? the success level, at least in recent years, it hasn't been there consistently. And that's why there's coaching changes, multiple ones since Spurrier left. So I think the big thing now for South Carolina is, what do they need to do this weekend to be able to continue to find ways? And it kind of goes back now, Michael, to your second question, which is, how can we get the ball to Bell and Stogg and get them more involved? Juice didn't see many targets either last week. When the running game's working, we need to take tight end. I'm going to answer that question, then we'll answer this phone call. I think, look, the easiest way you can do that is you just get the ball to him the quickest way, right? Sometimes we've seen handoffs. Obviously, that's with Lloyd. And we've seen even some motions in orbit motions. And that's, what you're seeing, I think, last week where they run back in motion, go around the quarterback, kind of looks like you're, in the solar system, right? Orbiting the sun. So I bring all that up because continuing to find ways, it's kind of like an extension of like just doing like a sweep or the option. But screen passes. I know Savell Newton has been saying this a lot, and I do agree with them, trying to get some more slants. And I do feel like, going back and watching some of the tape from the last couple games. Again, I got to go back and watch this one from a 22 version, the all 22 version. But there were opportunities that South Carolina called slants. Maybe they just didn't, hit on all of them. But I've noticed a couple things that are different. Okay. It's just about execution now. That's what it comes down to more than anything. I think the thing too is, look, I know a lot of people want to see Bell have the ball more. I totally understand it. We understand what he's capable of doing when he has the ball in his hands. I think Satterfield wants to do that. I think that's why at the beginning of the season, we saw Satterfield have him in the backfield a lot. Why? Because, well, think about it back into your youth football days. Who's usually the most athletic player on the field in youth football? It's usually the running back. Why? Well, because it's so easy just to get him the ball, because all you got to do is take the hike and hand it off to him. So I think South Carolina, during that time period when there was a lot of growing pains and they needed to develop just the rapport with Rattler and the offensive line and the guys working around him, instead of trying to make things a little bit more difficult, they try to simplify things by just handing it off to him. I think we're past that stage now. And I think Rattler is more comfortable. I think what you do now is, though, we talked about it before, getting him outside the pocket, extension of the run game, right? Running the football to be able to open up the passing game. I think you just got to be able to do things where you can get the ball out quickly. Get the ball out quickly. We've seen screens. I know fans get a little tired of just seeing screen. But, I mean, we've seen it with Juice. As soon as you get the ball to a guy like Juice or get the ball to Bell, we see how quickly they can take off. And Austin Stogner, of course, he had a big game the other night. He had 3 catches for 46 yards. Antoine Wells, 3 catches for 37. Jaheim Bell, 2 for 20. So, I think you're starting to see it a little bit more. It's just not popping the same way because you're not seeing some of those home run hits, and you're not seeing crazy statistics. But I mean, again, just looking at that box score, you can tell they're trying to find ways. We got a call right now, and of course, it is Lady Bree. Lady Bree, how you doing?
I'm good, Mike. I called in just to kind of touch on something you were saying, and it was a lot to do with, I've heard, you've heard me call in. Like, one of the first times I called in, I talked about the positive energy we all need to be putting out. And, a lot of what I keep hearing, I even heard on another podcast, well, the last 7 years, we haven't done this and that, and and it's like, look, guys, the end of the Spurrier area was awful. The Muschamp era was awful, but we are above that. We're going past that. Let's put out the positive vibes. Now, I create content now, so of course I have to give critique when I do that, and I can't just be everything's the sunshine and rainbows when I do that. But I always remind everybody, keep being positive. Keep being positive.
Well, Lady Bree, we'll keep positivity. I think right now we're at an all-time high for Gamecock positive Twitter, and for people that have been following me on Twitter for the last couple of years. You guys know exactly what I'm talking about. We've been bringing it back a little bit. But that thing, I think, is over 30-something days. That is an all-time high. So, again, we'll have basketball starting up, multiple sports going on and everything, and makes it a little bit more challenging sometimes. Everyone has to do their job, as Bill Belichick would say. But I think, look, I think things are good right now. Things are good with South Carolina. And I think it goes back to a question that Cade also just brought up. Mike, can we talk hypothetically? We all know we could go, 8-2 and go into but how high would they be ranked? I'll say this, Cade, because I don't want to really get into the hypothetical popsicle headaches right now, because the bottom line is this: they have to beat Missouri this weekend. But in terms of the ceiling for this team, and I'm not even specifically talking about wins and losses, I think more than anything, this team has the ability to finish the season off pretty strong. And what we're seeing an improvement in all three phases. Defensively, yeah, they've took their hits this season. They've struggled, but you know what? And it's not making excuses. I just think the proof's in the pudding. They dealt with so many injuries early on. Jordan Strawn was a guy going into this season who I thought was going to lead the team in sacks. And losing him week 2 to an ACL injury. And then, oh, by the way, you also lose Mo Kaba. You lose a linebacker week 2 as well to an ACL injury. I mean, to lose guys like that early on in the year, on top of the fact that RJ Roderick got hurt early in the game in week 1 against Georgia State, some other injuries that happened on defense. We know Cam Smith was banged up at times. We see some other guys in the secondary banged up. The defense was in shambles from a health standpoint. They were in shambles. And we mentioned it after the Georgia game. And I wish I brought the tweet up, but I think basically what I said was the 3 things that South Carolina needs to do right now is, 1, they need to get healthy. They need to get healthy. Number 2, I think it was finding an identity on offense. And I hate using that phrase, identity. I think it's such a lazy phrase, but I don't think South Carolina really knew what they wanted to do from an offensive standpoint. That's the way I usually like to word it. What do we want to be? What do we want to do? I don't think they knew what they wanted to do yet. I think they wanted to throw the football a little bit more than they are doing right now, but the run game started to open up, and you have to give a lot of credit to the offensive line. A lot of credit. We just had former Gamecock offensive lineman and captain Mike Matulis on earlier this week on Mixing a Water Monday, and he mentioned just the movement they're getting and just how when he watches that, you can just tell they're playing with confidence. And that just goes back to being comfortable with the playbook, being comfortable with the scheme, being comfortable with what they're being asked to do. So, look, again, there's 11 players on the field. It's real easy just to be, following the ball and where's it going, passing it, running it. But, starting from the offensive line and working out, the offensive line is doing a good job with this. They really are. We mentioned this, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, with when Gwen was named the SEC Offensive Lineman of the Week. I mean, that doesn't happen if the offensive line just has a crappy performance as a whole. You need to have a good showing by the whole O-line, because if, 2 guys have a crap game and it shows, right? Offensive lineman, like a guy like Gwen, he's not going to get recognized by that. He just won't. So I think that's the big thing, is they need to continue to find ways to grow in each phase. And I think that's why we're talking about the offense right now, because special teams, it goes without saying. It goes without saying. They've been probably the best special teams unit in the country. I mean, what more can we really talk about that? We can probably say Darius Rush needs to catch that punt inside the 5, or, do a better job of blocking on that blocked kick the other night. I mean, the special teams unit has been very good this year. And then defensively, they've got better because they're getting healthier. Alex Huntley out there the other night, and I said this during the game, having him out there might not necessarily show up in the box score, but he was taking on 2 blocks sometimes, and it was fraying up guys like Jordan Birch and other guys on the offensive line, Zach Pickens, and they were making plays. That's the impact that you have with a guy like Boogie Huntley. That's the impact that you have with some of these guys that are out there, that even in the secondary, what's happening, right? I mean, Darius Rush is having a phenomenal season. And I think a lot of people that follow this team closely year round, you expected that. Marcel Dial, he's been a guy that some games it's, maybe not a play or two that goes his way, but then he answers back big time. He's had a couple interceptions this year. Guys are making plays. Spalding, a guy last year who was starting the majority of the season at the beginning at nickel, loses his spot to a Division II transfer in Carlin Splittell. You think that, it could have been real easy for him just to have been pouting this year and just be like, you know what, screw it and this and that. He buckled down, came back this year, and he's made an impact. And we've seen him do some good things on the field. So I think with this team, and it goes without saying too, I mean, Nicky Minworry, DQ Smith, some of the younger guys that are playing out there, the defense has just got better as the year's gone on. As the year's gone on. Offensively, they have got better. We've mentioned that. It's just, I think that's the area when you're looking at all three phases, where can things get better? Okay, it can get better across the board. If that's what you want the coach's speech, I could say that. Coach's speech, they can get better on all three phases. No kidding. Okay, well, when you really start breaking things down, and we talked about the defense, right? At the beginning of the year, I said they needed to do a better job of getting off the blocks on the perimeter and coming up and making tackles, and how sometimes, especially we talk about how short passes are an extension of the run game. That's what we saw on them, right? Especially when they were beat up at the nickel position, teams were attacking them by just doing quick outs, screen passes. That's an extension of the run game. Same type of angles, most of the time as a cornerback, where you need to get off your block and you'd be able to make a tackle on the perimeter like you would in the run game in your run fits. So I think from an offensive standpoint, it's promising to see how they're finishing games, how they're looking in the second half in the last couple of weeks. But it's just trying to figure out the $1 million question. And I'm sure Shane Beamer would say, hey, you know what? If we had just the magic formula or the answer to say, what do we need to do in the first quarter to get things going, they would do it. They would. I do feel like, though, Joe, that you'll see South Carolina try to establish the run maybe a little bit more than they did last week. I did feel like they got away from it. And again, we mentioned it before. All right. A&M was stacking the box, and it became, more, it just felt like you knew it was predictable when they were going to run the ball. Right. So that was one of the things.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. I think especially against Missouri, they're going to want to try to find their run game identity, especially with Florida going on the road. You're going to need your run game to show up. So they're going to try to, make the run game as prevalent and as known as possible, because number one, it sends a message to Florida. Number two, it helps within the building too. Like, you find your identity again. They've been building it and building it and building it through these non-conference games, through Kentucky, and what we saw through Texas A&M. And it wasn't necessarily there against Texas A&M. So Missouri's a big week to really establish the run game against an SEC team again, and really, build momentum going into Florida, build momentum going into Tennessee and Clemson. Like, it matters how well they play against Missouri, or establish a run game against Missouri, because it really does carry on to next week's. And it's going to be key, because you can't not run the football in the SEC. Can't get away with that, unfortunately.
Michael, and to everyone that's been submitting some comments on the side, I apologize that we've fallen behind a little bit. This was from 741. We're going to go a little bit later tonight, guys, because why not? Things are good right now in Gamecock Nation. Let's keep talking about the Gamecocks. That interview today on Sirius XM for the SEC, for SEC Radio, I believe you can go back. I mean, I don't have a subscription anymore to Sirius XM. But I used to be able to go back, and it was kind of like an archive, and you could go back and find it. So, Joe, you nodding your head? Is that how it works? You got a series?
I believe so. Yeah, and I'm sure you can find it on Twitter. There's some different media out there. I'm sure.
Yeah, I can't post it anywhere just because there's certain rights that they have. I remember I did that. I think the first time I went on, years ago. Back in I say years ago, it was only a couple of years ago, but feels like years ago. Back in 2020. So, and Cocky Talk. Man, go Pats. Well, tough one for New England.
I don't want to bring up the Celtics, Mike. I don't even want to bring up the Celtics.
Nothing to talk about. To bring it back to South Carolina, Kevin Harris, who is still on the 53-man roster as of tonight of this podcast on Tuesday, October 25th. He was inactive on Monday night. He was a healthy scratch, and that's because Damian Harris, the starting running back that used to play at Alabama, for our SEC fans out there that follow the rest of the league, not just the Gamecocks, he was back on the roster. So that's one of the reasons why, but we'll have to wait and see if Kevin gets placed back on practice squad or if he'll stay on the active roster. But I can tell you, New England really likes him. New England really likes him. Brandon says, I don't even think it'd be the offense. We missed 22 tackles that game. Our defense is so improved since then. And that's going back, I believe you're responding to the Lady Breeze question or talking about the Georgia game early on in the year or the Arkansas game. It could have been the Arkansas game. I think that's something that has got better. But I think, again, it goes back to things that we've talked about on this program, Joe. A lot of times when you miss tackles, it comes down to, come down to effort. We know that. I mean, that's a given. I don't think effort's ever been an issue with this team. I think more so than not, it's just been where they've been from a positional standpoint and just where they're aligning themselves up, more so pre-snap wise. And when you have so many new faces out there, when you have so many young faces out there, because, look, you've had to turn to some 2s and 3s a little bit earlier on in the season than you probably anticipated, in large part because of the injuries. And there's going to be guys like the Nick Eamon-Worries of the world that can just step right in and it'll make look like nothing, right? Just an easy handoff, kind of like handing off a baton in track and field, right? Then there's going to be some times where it's just going to be growing pains, which we've seen from an offensive standpoint, which we've seen in defense in years past. It's one of those things. And I feel like as the season's gone on, these guys truly know what the heck they're doing and they feel more comfortable out there more than anything. And as a result, we're seeing them make plays. Now, again, okay, Arkansas on the road week 2, Georgia. Are these teams, and I know Arkansas is not having the type of year that I think they envisioned them having. It's been a tough year for them, but look, I don't care who they're playing. I don't care if it's Charlotte. I don't care if it's SC State, because all we heard after those 2 weeks, well, they should beat these teams. They should beat them. I mean, they should beat South Carolina State. I'm not impressed. Not until they do it against Kentucky. Well, they did against Kentucky. Well, they had backup quarter. They did against Texas A&M. If you're in that camp where you're just like, you're still not happy about this team, I don't know what the heck to tell you. Like, really, I'm not telling you again. And that's why I brought up the offense right from the jump. Okay. Because there are things that they need to be better at. Again, and Beamer would probably say all 3 phases. Defense needs to continue to do what they're doing. Okay. Especially over the last couple of weeks. The run game, in terms of stopping the run and doing a good job, they're doing a much better job. That was something that we talked about after even the Kentucky game. They did a great job in the second half. They did a great job this past game. I felt like in terms of getting those stops when they needed to and being able to contain the run. But it's comical that there are still some people that just don't want to believe. And you know why, though, Joe? And it goes back to what we were talking about from a mindset standpoint when we're talking about the players. People have this notion that, okay, this is good, but I'm waiting for the letdown. Yeah. They've had 2 big wins. In situations where maybe in years past, they don't. Maybe they don't find ways to win in Kentucky. Maybe they don't find a way to beat Texas A&M once the wheels started to fall off a little bit. Those are the things that are standing out to me that are just different, that we alluded on earlier on in the program, that I don't feel like the players think that way anymore. So when you're getting ready for a game like Missouri this week, you need to make sure that, hey, look, there's a lot of firsts that you're experiencing right now as players for a majority of this team. This cannot be one of those moments where it's like, hey, you know what? We're top 25. This is great. Maybe some people on campus. Maybe there's, more pretty girls waving at you. I don't know what the hell the case may be. I was never ranked, I don't know what a ranked team's like. But
I guess a difference of answers today across the building as to, the ranked question, right? A lot of guys have been like, Stogner was one guy. He's like, I really don't care. Like, we're just focused on Mizzou. And then you had another guy, I believe it was it was Brad Johnson. Brad Johnson and Cam Smith were both like, I've never been ranked. Like, this is awesome. Like, I've never felt this before. I've never won. And so what Cam Smith kind of said was like, he's like, I'm teaching these young guys, like, hey, like, it hasn't always been like this. So let's just keep our heads down and keep working. And Brad Johnson made a great point in saying that, like, Coach Beamer was telling them to ignore all the bad energy early on in the season. Put the blinders on and focus on what they have going on. And he said the message hasn't really changed. he said it's going to be very easy now, especially that they're ranked, to go out there and get easily like pats on the back and stuff and find gratification for the play that right now. But what Brad said, like, just turn on the blinders. That's how you can kind of keep things rolling and just focus on what is going on in the building. And it's very, very easy to accept positive energy and positive feedback. And it's easy to get complacent. And this team, from everything that I've seen, is just keeping rolling and is really, really, really focused on the zoo.
So trying to answer some of these questions here. Big Reg, we expect a great atmosphere at Willie B this weekend against Missouri. I do. And I get it. Even though Missouri's towards the end of the barrel, as you put it, the SEC barrel, it's homecoming. It's homecoming. I expect that crowd to be absolutely electric. It's a 4:00 game. Got the State Fair in town too. I know it's funny because it wasn't too long ago, Joe, that people were griping that there were too many 12 o'clock games. It seemed like everyone was griping. I felt like I had to see the fan base every week. And now there's just all 7 o'clock games, 7:30 games. People are complaining about that. Some people are complaining about that. 4 o'clock game, people are finally happy. I think it's a good time too. This time of the year. You'll have that nice warmness at the beginning of the game and, be able to go out, get a drink or two if they enjoy your evening. If they're able to get the win or I don't know how many people would want to go out after a loss, but I think the crowd's going to be big. We've seen sellouts in every game this year, I believe, except for SC State, which was the Thursday night game that obviously there was the hurricane that impacted that game, and that's the reason it got moved up. But outside of that, I mean, the crowds have been awesome. And again, I had a chance to go back there this past weekend. I'm not going to take a credential from, ham bones like intern Joe and Kendall and Mike anytime I come back in town, because I'm back here. It's just like, all right, if I come back for the Tennessee game, I'm not going to do that to those guys. I can still get the job done. But I say all that because it gave me a unique opportunity to experience it from a place that I don't get to watch too many games, which is in the stands. And shout out to Cox by 90, hooking us up with some tickets in the Cockaboose Club and sitting directly behind that field goal post about, 17, 18 rows up, and seeing, I remember tweeting about it, seeing that field goal post just shake. And it was not windy. I mean, if you guys were there, you know exactly what I'm talking. It was not windy in there. That thing was shaking just because literally the stadium was swaying.
Oh, yeah.
And it was absolutely incredible. So home field advantage, it definitely made a big impact this past week. Beamer mentioned it, 8 full starts on Texas A&M. Yeah, they had a young center in there, but you know what, though? Look, if there's any team, if there's any fan base that's not going to feel bad for other teams having to play backups, that's going to be South Carolina. Because after they had to go through last season, after going through musical chairs, 3 different starting quarterbacks because of injuries, then, of course, a 4th one, that was by choice in the Duke's Mayo Bowl with Joyner. No one's going to feel bad for other teams if they are a Gamecock fan. I can promise you that. I can promise you this team is not going to feel bad. Why? Because no one was feeling bad for them last year when they went on to get 6 wins in the regular season, and they were obviously able to go to the bowl game and get their 7th win. No one was feeling bad for them. No one felt bad when Jason Brown had to come out against Florida and then guess what? Beat the crap out of them. So I'm bringing that up because I definitely think it needs to be hit on. I think someone mentioned, people are trying to downplay the wins against A&M and Kentucky. I think it's more so people outside of Columbia. I get it. And it's not saying that this team has arrived. Let's not get it twisted. This is not saying that, all is well and good in South Carolina. I mean, that's the reason we brought up the offense, because I think it's important to keep things into perspective. I'm not going to go off the deep end like some people here. I've been seeing what are we going to do with the offense? Well, it's not as bad as you think. It's just saying that there definitely needs to be some work done. But we're seeing throughout the course of the game some good on offense. We're also seeing some things where they're just not executing. But we're also seeing the offensive line play well. We're also seeing Rattler just look smarter out there. And I think that's the thing that frustrates me more than anything, when we hear people just gripe about the offense all the time. All off season, all I had to freaking keep hearing about was that the offensive line was a weakness, or it was the Achilles heel for the offense, right? And Beamer, mentioned it at SEC Media Days. I know we wrote a story about it too, about the fact that they had all their returners come back. And then you throw in the fact that you have Wanham in there too. So you have 6 guys that have played a lot of meaningful snaps at South Carolina. And yet people wanted to just talk about all offseason that, oh, I don't know about the offensive line. I'm worried about the offensive line. I'm worried about the offensive line. Offensive line has not been an issue this year. But guess what? Because the offensive line is doing their job, and I get it. No one's going to throw a parade for a bunch of offensive linemen. You know, when the offensive line's doing their job, and you're not hearing anyone, right? It's typically because, like I said, they're doing their job. Not hearing anything about it, everything's good. Notice how quickly you're hearing crickets. No one's talking about the O-line. Why? Because they're doing their job. So, again, like Joe said, there's going to be a scapegoat. And because those critics don't have anything to complain about the offensive line right now, or as much, and don't get me wrong, you know, there'll be some times I'm sure they'll give up a sack or two along the way, okay? It's going to happen. I don't want someone to get this clip and just be like, oh, look, Mike, you said everything's good. It's football, okay? It's football. You're only as good as your next play. But they have done a great job up to this point. Look, because of that, I think that's where all the attention is going now towards, is the offensive coordinator. And I'm not saying that some of it isn't justifiable, okay? But I just think that's where it's at, is that we're losing sight of the good that we're seeing. Now, I'm not asking anyone to, to throw parade for the offensive lineman. But instead of just getting so caught up on one thing, can you look at something else that a lot of you, I'm looking you guys in the eyes, a lot of you were griping about all freaking offseason. Can you say, you know what? Shoot. Yeah, this offensive line is doing a good job. Yeah, you know what? You know, Marshawn Lloyd, who I had doubts about, and I'm not saying me personally, but there were people out there that I saw this from because he was come back from an injury, and rightfully so. Totally get that. Yeah. You know, it's just, but it feels like less people want to focus on the good that we're seeing with this offense. Yeah. That's why, and it's funny, right? Because I led off this show talking about where they need to improve on. I'm probably putting so many people's heads in pretzels right now because they don't understand that, yeah, you can be critical about a team and still give them credit. I feel like what I've seen is there's so many people that are just critical about the offense. You can be critical. I'm going to say that again. You can be critical about the offense, yet also look at the offense and say, you know what? There's a lot of good things that are going on right now.
Yeah. They're winning football games, Mike. They're winning football games. At the end of the day, shouldn't winning trump all? And like, I get it. Like, you're right. That point was perfect. Like, you can be critical and stuff. And like, your point on the offensive line couldn't be any more correct too. Eric Douglas and Joe Von Gwyn have really stepped up and getting the group and cohesiveness. And their belief throughout has always just been like, if we work together and we keep doing what we're supposed to be doing, it's going to pay off. And it has. But again, I think, there will be improvements, and you can kind of pick and choose. And, the team is, I mean, from my eyes, at least, they've done a pretty good job of, learning from week to week. There have been tune-ups, and we've seen that. It's a progression, right? And that's kind of what you want to see. And I also think that's where a lot of the hope from this year is stemming from, is the progression that we've seen from this team this season. Like, it's very easy to get hopeful when you've seen a massive growth from year 1 to year 2 in Beamer's program. Like, it's huge. So it's very easy to get hopeful. And, sometimes it's the hope that kills you. And, I hope not. But, but I mean, like, that I feel like that's what all this is coming down to. And the offensive line play has been stellar since, Georgia really. And even then, we weren't necessarily hearing about sacks. And if there was a sack, it was something Spencer got out of the pocket and behind the line. But yeah, Bree's comment up there, like you said, Mike, we need a little bit more positivity. Bree's call was perfect tonight because it really gave a scope and kind of just what this, I guess, fan base needs to.
I'll say this. Okay. And maybe it's because I'm in 2 different markets right now, and it's obviously a pro market versus a college market. And you're going to be more critical sometimes in a pro market about certain things. But that's not to say that you can't be critical about college athletics. Okay. I think the biggest difference I've noticed that's just different, I think I was talking with Dante Reno about it last night because he was asking me, is the difference with South Carolina is when fans are upset, they won't gripe about a player. typically. I think I'd probably say like 95% of the time it's not about a player. It's just going to be more directed at that coach and that position group. Because we had a great conversation about that, and I've brought this up before. We've had this on our program the last couple of weeks. It was Dante Reno 2 weeks ago. It was Pop Howard last week. But I think it's important to bring this up because you just never know who's listening, and we have a lot of people that have been tuning in these last couple of weeks, but they may have missed it, which is when fans get upset and they go on social media and they tweet and this and that or whatever, and a lot of people view that as not being positive. You know what that is? It's just called being a fan. Okay. Now, again, I'm not a fan of the Gamecocks. I just covered the team. I'm covering the Patriots. And even though I grew up a Patriots fan, I don't view it as fandom anymore. It's kind of like you lose that sense of like your innocence when you find out like the tooth fairy isn't real. And I hope to God no one's playing this in the car while they're bringing their kid to school tomorrow. But I bring all that up because it's okay to be critical. It's okay to say things. And the beauty of it is, like Reno said, because we were talking about it yesterday, and we were just laughing because he's just like, I don't pay attention to that stuff. He's like, if anything, I just look at it, hey, you know what? They care. They're passionate. That's not to say that, Johnny 64328 on Twitter, when he gets upset and keeps going off and everything, like that's not saying like any thought that comes in your mind, you should just go on Twitter or social media or go in front of a camera and just say whatever the hell you want. Obviously I do this for a living. This is why I'm in front of it. And fans have that platform now. You don't necessarily have to be in the media world. You can just pick up your phone. But what I'm trying to get at is that I think it's one of those things that I laugh at so much. I'm not going to be a cheerleader of a team that I cover. I'm just not. Okay. We see that with certain media members in the upstate. I'm not going to do that. I've seen that at South Carolina with some of my colleagues over the years. I'm not going to do that. I know that there's a lot of USC alum. If you want a cheerleader, you know what? There's a lot of cheerleader sites out there. But I'm also not going to be the type of guy that just comes on here and just starts saying, fire this person, do that, this and that. It's just like, no, it's like, if you're listening to our show, if you're reading our content, we're going to try to give you some type of perspective of what the hell's going on, some substance. So I bring all that up though, Joe, because when I see the fans get upset, I'm not saying directed at me, but just in general, people talk, and I'm not saying this about Lady Bree, but we talk about just positivity and, no negative stuff out there. It's just like, no, it's just fandom. But right now there's a lot to be happy about. There's a lot to be positive about, but there's also areas where they can improve on. And that's why we started off the show in the manner in which we did, was talking about the offense and how they can get better. Because if they can come out hot this week, boy, they should be able to win the next 3. If they can do that, I'm not trying to get ahead of myself here, but if they can come out and play the way that they've been playing in the second half of games from an offensive standpoint, they're going to be looking good these next 3 games. But they need to do it this week. They need to do it this week against Missouri. This is a team, again, that has done a good job defensively. 3 losses by less than 7 points. They held Vandy to 14. I know Vandy's not world beaters, but Vandy also put up 60-something plus points against Hawaii. I get it. Hawaii's not that great this year, but they had a fly out to Hawaii. And I know a lot of people aren't going to ever say, oh, poor so-and-so because they had to go to Hawaii. That's a freaking hike, man. And so to do that and to be able to play the level that they were, while, probably getting laid left and right. See what I did there? Get off the plane, Joe. That's you can't, Joe. You put the flowers around, is what they say. There you go. So, I think what they need to be able to do is they need to come out and they need to do that this weekend. And if they can do that this weekend, man, this is going to be something special to see.
Yeah, Mike, absolutely. I loved your point. I'm going to back up a little bit. I loved your point about Twitter, right? That's fandom. That is the beauty of SEC football, and that's the beauty of, being a fan and following college athletics. Like, there is a direct pathway on social media to, kind of air your grievances. But Mike, again, you're right. They got to, there's hope for these next 2-3 weeks. Vanderbilt, Missouri, and Florida. Like, and not to, dunk on or take any of these teams lightly. Like, Missouri has a very good defense, and Eli Drinkowitz has, really made a change last year with the defensive coordinator, and they've really stepped it up there on defense. And you're right about Vanderbilt's offense. Clark Lee is a really good coach. And there's always a chance. Like in the SEC, there's always a chance for anybody to beat anybody, almost. And I hate to dunk on Vanderbilt a little bit, but not the best couple of years. But, again, they're talented. There are guys in the SEC that are talented across the board. You're going to get guys that are freakishly athletic in the SEC, and that's what makes this conference so much different. Like it really does mean more.
You got to go back to cocky talk. You're not a Gamecock fan. I'm not put it this way. I don't hate South Carolina. I like covering college football. I didn't grow up in South Carolina. I didn't go to school at South Carolina. I don't have a college football team. I grew up an ND fan just because college football is just not big in Massachusetts. It's all pro base. You build a relationship with coaches and players, and you want to see them do well. So certainly there's people at South Carolina that, from an individual standpoint, I want to see them do well. Covering a team when they're winning, it makes things a hell of a lot more enjoyable. So certainly it's more enjoyable when South Carolina is winning. So it's been a lot of fun. This season's been a lot of fun. So, but I say that because, when you look at the word fan, like a Kirk Collinsworth, right? I'm not a Kirk Collinsworth. I mean, that's a guy that has gone to 360 something plus games in a row, or Chris Fulmer. So I have to explain my fan. I know Lady Bree's like, Mike,
calling you out, Mike.
My girlfriend keeps. I'm like, I'm not. Like, I'm not. I'm not. You're never gonna see me cheering for a team that I'm covering. You're just not gonna see that. If you want that, if that's what you want, again, there are people out there. I remember after the Georgia game, there were people that got upset with me because we were being critical. And this kind of goes back to what we were talking about before. It's okay to be critical. Even when things are going well, or, when you're given a compliment, you could still be critical about it, because that's what sports talk should be, and, it shouldn't be just, let's just talk about rainbows and how everything's great. And, this player is fantastic. And, no, let's break down things. I mean, let's add some substance. But after the Georgia game, it was funny, Joe. I don't know if you were on that one. It was with, I don't think you were that day. It was with Skarnecki after the Georgia game.
Yep.
And people were upset because I was being too critical. I wasn't a fan of the team. And then some people were saying I'm too much of a homer. So I was getting hit left and right from all directions. I love it. So it just goes to show that, hey, look, we'll have a little something for everyone.
Baby. You gotta love it. It's the best part. Like, I love SEC Twitter.
But this is why I enjoy the SEC, though. I mean, covering the NFL has been an absolute dream. But SEC football, going to those games, the passion from the fan bases and stuff, because look, for a lot of the people that are fans of South Carolina, you could say the same for a lot of the other schools in the SEC. That is their pro team. That is what their, not just Saturdays, but that's what their year really revolves around. And obviously, it's, if it's basketball season, there'll be a lot of people that go out and support the Gamecocks. And I think the beauty of being in a place like Columbia, South Carolina with football is it matters year round. And that's the beauty over at Gamecock Central. So not to get too off track here. I do want to make sure we read some ad reads. Big Red, there's a difference between constructive criticism and bashing a team. You're handling it well, Mike. Well, I appreciate it, Big Red. We'll see if you're saying that. I'm joking on with you, but we'll see if people are saying that in a couple of weeks. If God forbid this thing takes a turn for the worse, and hopefully that doesn't. That's knock on wood. Okay, now someone's going to get mad at me for saying that. Do want to read some ad reads here because, again, we're going a little bit longer tonight than we typically do, but there's a lot to talk about. As Bree said, spread the positivity, and let's spread the availability to help you with your tax season, because we talk about football season. Before you know it, football season is going to be done and tax season is going to be right around the corner, and Liberty Tax can help you overcome that taxiety. Give our friends a call over at 803-462-5576. Liberty Tax has been a proud sponsor of Gamecock Central and GC Live for quite some time, and they have helped out a lot of people throughout the Midlands to be able to get their taxes together, and a lot of GC subscribers. So I know we have a lot of people that would be able to endorse them. And speaking about endorsement, how about an endorsement for Clint Hammond and the guys over at the Mortgage Network? They do an outstanding job. We've heard Perry Orth, former Gamecock quarterback, talk when he was buying a home and he had to go through all that process of getting things set up. Who did he call? He called Clint because Clint gets the job done. Give Clint a call at 803-576-4450. Buying a home right now is a little crazy, Joe. In a couple of years, when you grow up and you're a big boy and you go from intern Joe to just Joe in general, you'll learn about that. And if you're still in this area, well, maybe you should give Clint a call. He'll be able to help you out. Yeah, Big Red says you don't want penalties on the field or with your taxes. That's for damn sure. That is for damn sure. No question about it. I do want to, Lady Bree, what's that? Mike, I know you skipped over my question about the game footage, but it was more of a private thing anyway. Which one was that, Lady Bree?
I think she asked if we got access to like game footage.
Oh, I'm sorry, Lady Bree, if I missed that. Some of these questions, I'm trying my best to keep up with them. Yeah, right. You're a homer. Yeah, big time. So
Absolutely.
big. Yeah, I got my Gamecock pajamas on right now.
Yeah.
What I would say about the footage, Lady Bree, I have, there's people that I talk to that give me access to that. Oh, it wasn't meant for the show. Well, we'll put it out here anyway. And we've talked about it before. We've shared some things. I think it was special teams, but we'll try to share some more with the all 22. I just trying to make sure that I keep getting access to that so I can tell you guys what I'm seeing. But if we can share that, that would be fantastic. It's all these freaking digital copyrights, Joe. It's making things a pain in the ass these days. Yeah, I think it's definitely something we'd love to be able to do. It's something that I think could be educational for a lot of people, and it can really help with just show some of the things that we're seeing that you don't see when you're watching the game, or you can't see when you're watching it from the broadcast view. So talking about Missouri, Joe, okay? Talking about Missouri. Say it ain't so, Joe, as Steve sends that question. Talking about Missouri, again, awesome opportunity. And I think that's the best way just to put it. This is an opportunity to be able to do another first. And that's to be able to win as a ranked team for the majority of these players. Is that a stat that's going to be discussed really in comparison to, I don't know, beating A&M for the first time in school history? No. Is that going to be discussed like South Carolina being on a 4-game winning streak for the first time in a decade? No. Or about USC, or is it 2013? Because I'm losing all my years here. There's so many freaking numbers I'm just in my head. But nearly a decade, excuse me. Or the first time beating Kentucky in a decade on the road. No. But this is something that's important. This is something that's important. It's just as important as being able to beat Kentucky and A&M in the sense of being able to develop that mindset that when, you know what, things don't go well throughout the course of the game. As a player, you don't need that, oh, here we go feeling. There'll be fans out there that will feel that way. There'll be fans that will feel that way even if South Carolina were to win a national championship in the next 5 years, for crying out loud. You know, that following season in year 6, there'll be someone that, sitting there, some old man or whatever. All right, they're up 20-0. They'll blow this. They'll blow this. Yep. I've come to that conclusion. That's fandom. That's fandom. So I say all that, Joe, because we've seen that over the last 2 games, and that's huge in terms of taking that next step and wanting to be able to find different ways to improve your program. This is just as important. Ranked 25, and it's not like you're going up against a team who you have to do mental gymnastics for to convince yourself that they can beat. This isn't Georgia. This isn't, and I know Gamecock fans don't want to hear me say this right now, this isn't Tennessee right now. Okay, Tennessee's playing some really good football. But the beauty of that, before you play the Vols, you have a couple more games leading up to that to get some more momentum going. Okay, we'll put that to the side. This is a team that you should be able to beat. This is a team that it won't be as easy, I think, as some people think it will be. And I'm sure when we do the post-game show on Saturday, if South Carolina is able to get the win, there's going to be people that will say, they'll be upset about something. They'll find a reason to get upset. And that's okay. Okay. We're not all asking to just hold hands and sing Kumbaya here. Okay. But I do think with this Mizzou team, they're going to be stingy on defense. I know I've brought that up a couple times. The question is, and Joe, I don't know if are you going to media availability tomorrow or not?
No, we'll be there. Yeah.
Okay. Just the big thing is is just trying to figure out what this offense can do. And I know it's the $1 million question. It's probably been asked, all season, what they can do to be able to get those quick starts. And if they're able to do that against Missouri, I feel like they're going to be in a great spot. And just being able to get the run going, because it's just so important for this team. They need to be able to find ways to run the football. And you've got to a point now, Joe, where teams respect your run game. Teams respect your run game, okay? To the point where they're putting extra guys in the box. So, taking on a Missouri team, you have to be ready for that. You have to be ready for them to be in a position where they're going to try to come in the box and they're going to want to try to stop you because they know that you want to be able to run the football. They know that the majority of the success you've had this season has come off of being able to play off the run. Now, Missouri ranks 46th in the country when it comes to run defense. Okay. And you see that stat in comparison to some of the teams that they've played the last couple of weeks outside of Kentucky, who's now ranked 28th in the country. But I bring that up because they're still giving up 126 yards rushing. So what it comes down to is being able to establish that run early, Joe, but also finding ways, which just comes down to just trusting your skill players. Going back to what Beamer talked about after the game, what he said at halftime to Sat, we have to get the ball to our playmakers. Finding a way to get some of those big yards, right? 36-yard run, 40-something yard run, right? Continuing to go to the well and get things going in the run game and break some off. And if you can do that, shoot, Monday Night Football, we saw it last night. No one gave the Bears credit or shot to run the football on the Pats the way they did. They ran it for over 200-something yards. Now, of course,
they did.
Large part because of their quarterback, Justin Fields. But I bring that up, Joe, because that is how you just demoralize a defense. And I think that's what South Carolina needs to do. This will be a good test for them. This will be a good test.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. And I think one thing that we really haven't talked about is Missouri's offense. Those guys gave Georgia a game. People forget that Missouri really, really gave Georgia a scare there up there in Columbia. And so I think this offense has a lot of talent. Brady Cook, really talented quarterback. They have a wide receiver named Luther Burden. He's a really talented freshman wideout out of St. Louis who's been going crazy for them recently. I think this defense has their hands full too. The defense has played pretty good the last couple of weeks. It's been stellar. No complaints over the non-conference games, or no complaints necessarily against Kentucky either. And that also goes to testament too about how much this team has progressed, and we can get into that in the run game and Jordan Birch and how everyone knows that you can see the progression essentially from whether it go from the DB room, just getting Cam Smith back, getting Darius Rush back. That was huge. I wrote about it today. Go check that out on Gamecock Central. But it's really big, and this defense is going to have their hands full. It's just like I said earlier, every SEC team has athletes, every SEC team has good players across the board, and Missouri certainly has that on offense, especially in that wide receiving core and with Brady Cook throwing the ball. We saw again, like I said, against Georgia, that this offense can execute if they need to be or if they want to. So this defense will certainly have their hands full come Mizzou.
And I see Lady Bree talking about just the lack of success Missouri has had from a passing defense standpoint, or some of their secondary, I guess you could say is their weakness. It's not, and not saying that Lady Bree's saying this, but it's not like a Tennessee secondary, which I believe Tennessee is second to last in the country in passing yards allowed. But I bring that up because this is what I'm trying to get at, Joe. When we look back to some of these games, right, and we ask ourselves, why isn't South Carolina doing this? Why aren't they doing that? I think what needs that be the first question that's asked goes back to some of the things we've talked about over the last couple of weeks. That identity, right? Who are you? Who do you want to be? And if they are a team that wants to run the football, as Satterfield even said last week during media availability, then that's who you are. So I say that because that shouldn't change you're playing the following week. Okay. You're not playing the 85 Bears. You need to go out there and you need to be able to do what you want to do. No defense should dictate that. Now, again, teams are going to stack the box. They're going to bring an extra guy down. Okay. How do you combat that? Screen passes, short passes, slants. Force them to have to take a guy out of the box, and then it's going to free up the run game again. Okay. You can't just say, well, you know what? They're going to bring an extra guy down. Let's do something different. We've seen that from this team this year. That just doesn't work. And on top of that, that's just not who you are. I mean, literally, if you say you're a team that wants to run the football, why are you just going to get away from it altogether? Because there's a guy in the box? You don't have confidence in yourself to run the football? Or why aren't you trying to find ways to be able to get them out of the box? Again, screen passes, slants. You're not just going to be able to go out there and spread it out and then just get away from the run game if you want to win. I'm sorry. Okay. When we talk about Tennessee in a couple weeks, even though Tennessee has one of the worst pass defenses in the country, I'll be saying the same stuff. Want to know why? Because you haven't proven yet that you can pass the ball all over the yard. Yeah. You've had moments. Like Arkansas. You've had moments even against Georgia. Deep passes down the field on some of those deep routes. But you haven't proven consistently that you can throw the ball all over the yard. And what's going to happen is if you go out there and you're getting away from the run game early and you're not able to establish a run, even if a team wants to stack the box, but if you get away from it altogether, what's going to happen? 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. And while that's not helping your offense, it's certainly not going to help your defense out because they're going to be friggin' exhausted. Happened last night. I keep making all these, comparisons the last night with New England just because I was there. But that's what it comes down to. You need to be who you want to be. Make adjustments. It's part of the game, right? But that doesn't mean you should abandon it altogether. Can't afford that to happen on Saturday.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we've been talking about it, like this offense, and CBS even mentioned it too, because big topic of the pressers today was the third down play. And just like the play in general, like all around on third down, this offense hasn't been great, especially when drives start to get going a little bit. And CBS talked about how frustrating that was. He said it's really frustrating, like when we, start to get momentum going downfield, and then all of a sudden we get stuffed on third down. He's like, defense has to come back out and make a play for us. Like he's like, it's a little demoralizing. He's like, obviously, like we want to go out there, we got to be better on third downs. And he's like, I personally, he said himself, needs to, work on getting the extra yards and, really sticking your nose in there instead of trying to get 5, 6, 7, 8 on a 3rd and 2 carry. He talked more about just, being a big guy, being the big running back that they have, and being able to get those gritty yards. And that's what it's going to come down to. And that's always what it's been about in the SEC, really, Mike, is getting those gritty yards and being able to execute on the run game. And I think Missouri is a very, very good start going into Florida, going into Vanderbilt. And even against Tennessee, they got to find that identity. And I mean, passing wise, Mike, you said that perfect. Like, couldn't have said any better. Like, this team hasn't necessarily found its identity in the pass game. It's getting there. It's looking better. And it's kind of what we saw from the run game early on in the year, right? They stuttered, they sputtered a little bit, kind of coming out the gates. And then they all of a sudden have since found their identity. Marshawn Lloyd, CBS, the identity is there, and it's going to be key for them to keep improving on the identity in the run game. But passing wise, I think too, this week is another big one. Like, we're seeing the progression. Spencer's throwing for more than 100 yards and looking good, looking better. And so, it's really what it comes down to. And they got to find that come Tennessee too, if they want to win.
Let's wrap up by going through some of these questions. Rusty asking, what do we think about Coach Atkins? On the teleconference Sunday night, a question was asked about him, and Beamer didn't say much. Do you see him returning at some point or stepping down? I feel like the reason why Beamer's not really saying much about him right now is because he's going through what he's going through from a health standpoint. And there's some things that you're just not going to share publicly. Again, I make comparisons to the NFL because I'm covering both right now. It's night and day different, NFL compared to covering the SEC, because it's covering college, I should say, not even just SEC, college football. But that would be one thing that wouldn't be discussed regardless when you're dealing with health issues from a coaching standpoint. So obviously he went through some health issues a year ago. And this was a very special year for him to have the opportunity to coach his son. Obviously not directly, but to be there. So it's been difficult for him. I can tell you that much. Getting to know Greg, more so before I head down here because I haven't had a chance to talk with him much this year. He's an awesome guy. He's done a good job with the offensive line. The assistant coaches and the analysts behind him have done a tremendous job too. And they've carried the torch to keep things going. So just hope that he's all right. You hope that he's all right. Health issues, when they keep happening, you just hope for the best. And, I'm not going to speak upon something that I'm not I really don't know. I'll put it that way. I really don't know. It just comes down to hopefully him getting healthy and being able to return as soon as possible. Big Red again. Why don't we put Joyner into the lineup more? Just as something for teams to look at. I think, look, we've heard Beamer mention it, and I'm sure some fans aren't satisfied with the answer they've been getting, which is he has been playing, and it's been mainly on special teams. 4 special teams units he played the other day. I think here's just the reality of it. And this is just my God's honest opinion, because I don't think you'll hear Beamer say it directly. I think the thing is, South Carolina has done a good job of bringing in some very talented players, especially at the wide receiver position. I know that Dak did something in a bowl game that will have him live on in Gamecock lore forever. Right up there with what Ryan Brewer did in the Outback Bowl 20-something years ago. You could put it right up there with Eric Kimry in the Fade. And then obviously, you have legendary plays that you've seen throughout, the history of the Gamecocks, whether it be the Clowney hit or DJ Swearinger's hit. Obviously more so those were plays, but the point being is he's going to be remembered forever. I think the challenging part is this. You have a guy like Spencer Rattler out there. I understand. I'm not saying, Big Red directly. You're asking, you should go play quarterback or this or that. I'm sure there's going to be people saying, why isn't Dak at quarterback? Why isn't Dak at quarterback? I think there's been one play where Dak was at quarterback. I think it was the Georgia game, the first drive of the game, Joe, if I'm not mistaken, if you remember.
Yeah.
It was a Wildcat formation. It was 3rd down. And I think everyone in the stadium knew what was going to happen. And they decided to run it with them. They didn't get it. But I think just speaking from a wide receiver standpoint, I think just the room's so deep right now with talent. And that's not saying DK is not a talented guy. That's not saying DK is not athletic. We've seen what he's been able to do. And again, just go back to the Duke's Mayo Bowl. He's athletic. He's very athletic, but I just think it speaks volumes to what South Carolina is doing from a talent standpoint in terms of bringing in some talented guys. And when you talk about wanting to take this program to the next level, unfortunately, there's going to be guys that are talented that have been here before, and they might not be getting the same type of playing time as they have been in the past. And it's not a bad thing when you think about the big picture of the program, when you think about the team. It does stink, though, when you have a guy like DK who's done everything right. You talk about someone, if you had a daughter, you hope that you can find someone like DK to marry her. DK is just can't say enough good things about him. The fact that he went through injuries early on certainly didn't help him, I'm sure, with the calf injury, which really wasn't discussed that much at the beginning of the year, but he was going through a calf issue. And he kept battling through to the point where he's earned opportunities to play on 4 special teams units. So again, I'm sure there are people out there just because he's an easy person to cheer for. Easy person to cheer for. If DK was out there and he scored a touchdown tomorrow, that stadium would erupt. There's no question about it. But when you're looking at just the talent out there, and I know the next thing, I haven't looked at the comments since I've been saying all this. Some people are going to be like, well, we're not utilizing all that talent. Well, again, it's kind of what we talked about at the beginning of the show. That's a conversation for a different time, but it all goes back to, which is they have the talent out there and they need to do a better job of capitalizing on it. Didn't want to go too long-winded with that, but I just think that's something that needs to be kind of brought up. And look, we see a guy like Xavier Legette, like Lady Bree brings up, right? He had some drops against SC State. I'm not trying to beat a dead horse, but he had some drops against SC State in the past. Maybe you get away with that. And what I mean by that is because you just didn't have the depth at wide receiver. Now, and I'm not saying Legette's going to be buried on the depth chart, and that's what's happened since then, but there's some talented guys. And that leash sometimes for players, and I'm not saying this is the case for him, I'm just talking about in general, that leash can be a little bit tighter because you have a lot of talented guys. That wasn't the case a couple of years ago at wide receiver. This is a good thing. This is a good thing. It's showing that development in just recruiting. But then what happens? Legette goes out there, makes a play on special teams, and I can tell you, I can promise you, when you make plays on special teams, especially when things might not have gone your way at some point of the season, and you do that, it's a hell of a way to get back onto the field at whatever position you were playing at. So just wanted to bring that up. Yep, and intern Joe is here. And you got the HIPAA rules too, T. Yep. HIPAA is also a thing too about that. And I think too, T, I do want to bring this up because, yes, you don't have to get necessarily too deep into the thick of it as to what he's going through from a health standpoint. But I think it's difficult to say, okay, will he be back later on this year? Will he be back next season? Because that's a question that I just don't think you can answer right now, and it's not even about HIPAA violations or anything like that. I just think you just don't know because he's still going through it right now. And again, you send your best to Coach Atkins and hope that he's going to be all right. Try to go through these. I know we've been piling some of them up here. Joey asked Seth if he now has an idea of plays that work more often than not with the current scheme. I'll say this, Joey, because I'm not going to be able to be there tomorrow. I'm going to be at Belichick's press conference, which I'm sure is going to be riveting tomorrow. Intern Joe will be there, and I'm sure that's a question that's going to get brought up. But I think, again, kind of like we've talked about throughout the entire night as we approach 2 hours into this program, we get bonus edition tonight because we were late. See you, Lady Bree. We'll make it up by staying on later. Intern Joe, you don't got to do calculus homework or whatever. You're good.
Calculus, maybe a little journalism homework, but we're good.
But I think look, they are doing good things. They are. We're seeing execution out there, especially in the second half of these last two games. It just needs to be more consistent, and they need to continue to find ways to get the ball to their playmakers' hands. I wish I had the answer for you. I really do. I know there's going to be people out there, former players or other people that cover the Gamecocks or talk about the Gamecocks, and they're going to have their opinion on it. And that's not saying that what they're saying isn't right. But at the end of the day, unless you're in that locker room and truly understand what the hell they want to do from a schematic standpoint, it's difficult to say, okay, they should do this, they should do that. Because I've heard what some of these people have been saying. They have been doing some of it. They just haven't been executing it. And then there also are times where they're not doing things or they're doing things. It's like, why aren't they running the ball here? Right. But this happens every week on every level. Going to freaking high school football. Go to a game at a high school, right down the street. Anywhere other than Dutch Fork where it's all sunshine and rainbows right now. Go somewhere where anywhere and just go sit in the stands. And I'm sure someone's going to be griping about something with the offense. It's just how it goes. So intern Joe, that's your homework assignment. Put your big boy pants on and get some good questions in for Sat. Cocky Talk. How do you think Stone Blanton has played so far this season? I think he's done great. And I think he's also another guy that's found a spot on special teams. That was something I talked with Pete Lumbo about at the beginning of the season. And I use Blanton, but it could be anyone. When you're trying to figure out that, okay, you have 4 games to be able to maintain that red shirt year, but if a guy's really not playing on defense, but he's seeing more time on special teams, like what do you do? And he's like, it's a tough question. And we really want to be able to save guys' eligibility. If we really want to say it, we want to save them that opportunity to play at the end of the year in that bowl game, depending on what they're playing in. And, could be a couple snaps, but, because they're starting to think for next season, depending on what the bowl game is, of course. So I just bring that up because Stone, he's been doing a good job. He's been doing a very good job. And it's been really neat to see. Big Red again. Will we have any recruits coming this game? Chris Clark and Wes Mitchell will have that report. They always do for home games on which recruits will be there. So check that out on Gamecock Central. We will have that full rundown for you. And then what's about the Discord? Why is everyone all getting upset? Infatuation with the Discord was sad. I don't understand it. Plays are there to be made, and it's not too complicated. Yep. You're right. And this is why we've talked about it all night long. I don't know. I'm going to say this to man. I don't even know what the heck. How would you say that, intern Joe?
To man.
Man, 35. I'm just going to call you T because I'm going to probably butcher it.
Yeah.
But I just say that because, or Tama man, it could be. This is why we talked about the offense at the beginning, is that they have been doing good things. I know I'm a broken record now, but I'm a broken record at this point, but I'm not sure when you hopped on to listen to the program. They've done good things these last 2 weeks, especially in the second half. When you look at a whole from a offense, defense, special teams standpoint, special teams speaks for itself. Best in the country. Defensively, they've got better the last couple of weeks. Why? Well, they're getting healthier. They've made improvements. They did some good things in terms of stopping the run too, these last 2 games especially. Offensively, they're doing good things. There's going to be people out there that think the offense is just an absolute mess and you need to blow it up just because they're not getting the type of rhythm that they'd like to see. And I understand that. I'd like to see some more consistency. I'd like to see more of a rhythm. But I also feel like there's been times where there have been plays. Going back to what you're saying with your question, there have been plays and they need to make it. They need to make those plays. But it's okay to be critical about this team. We can talk about special teams. Want to be critical? They need to find ways to make sure they don't give up an onside kick at the end of the game. I'm sure that's something they're going to work on. We're not going to be, all sunshine and rainbows. I don't know how many times I got to say that. It's okay. It's okay to be critical and talk about some of the ins and outs of it and trying to find ways to get this program better. And look at this. We got more questions coming in. We're trying to log off. And look at all these questions coming in. Big Red again. And Lady Bree, you have like 8 comments in. I don't even know where to start with you. It was RPO, by the way. Van missed the big block. I don't even know exactly which that was about, Lady Bree. Big Red. Do we try a trick play every game this season? Define trick play. I think there's going to be things. I think back to the Jalen Brooks touchdown. I think it was against Kentucky. That was, I think that's what Perry referred to it as. It was orbit motion. And what that basically means is you're coming in motion. And like I said, it kind of looks like the planet's going around the sun in a sense, right? That half, that loop behind the quarterback. So I wouldn't call that a trick play. I just think they're starting to add more wrinkles into things. Does DK have any more eligibility? I'm trying to think. He might have 1 year left.
Check on that.
I think he might. Let's see. DK might have 1 year left because I don't think he. And I'm trying to remember when they changed the rules a couple of years ago.
Yep.
They changed the rules a couple of years ago because before, as we all remember, if you appeared in the game, you lost your red shirt. Then a couple of years ago, they changed that rule where you can get into up to 4 games, which I think is awesome. I think it's great because you're able to get players developed more. And I think that's what it should be all about. Lady Bree, again, it's a good show when it goes to 2 hours instead of 1. Yeah, don't get used to it. Don't get used to it. Unless I'm off on a Tuesday next week. We'll see. Patrick, how much is Beamer having a say in the offense? It seems he is focusing his opinion some on what's being done. I think honestly, he's put it this way. When Muschamp was here, Muschamp put a very, 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 very tight leash on his offensive coordinators. This is something, and we'll have Perry Orthoff on this week. I don't want to speak for him, but he can be the first to tell you. It was very tight. Here, Beamer trusts his coaches. He trusts his guys to do what they're doing. Now, obviously, he's going to add input at the end of the day, the head coach. If he wants to see something different, then he's going to say that. You also have Freddie Kitchens, who's adding some input as well. So I don't think it's a surprise that we're seeing some things adjusted at halftime and South Carolina is doing a better job. I'm sure, Beamer or Freddie Kitchens or whoever, they're adding their 2 cents at halftime, and we're seeing a couple things that are different. Goes back to what we were saying before, the $1 million question. They're doing good things. This is why, I won't say all right, it's time to fire Satterfield or this is awful. It's like, no, we're seeing good things. It's just not consistent. It's not right from the jump. they've proven, Satterfield's proven that he can call good plays. It's just not being consistently done. And again, like I said before, it also goes back to execution. Execution needs to be there. And it's got better as the season's gone on, and they certainly have been executing tremendously in the second half. I heard intern Joe's 7'2". Is this true?
Not quite. Probably I'm 6 foot flat, probably with the afro about 6'9". So, we're going it out for a little Halloween costume, Mike. We'll have a little something on the post game show on Saturday. So y'all enjoy it. I'm sure. So excited.
Let's keep going through this because we're about to hop right off in a second. And Lady Bree, I'm sorry. I'm trying to get all your comments in here. Patrick says, Dutch Fork, all I have to say is that 22-19 last year at Benedict for the state title. Go. Oh, I know. And I'm not a Dutch Fork guy or anything like that. I just cover them, but they're having a very impressive year again this year. But shout out to Gaffney for winning the state title last year. No question about it. Lady Bree, again, I have to continue to believe that Beamer will make the right choices for this program. He loves it more than any. Absolutely. And look, at the end of the day, we'll see how things go with this season. Sometimes things can be good, right? I mean, let's say South Carolina I'm just throwing this out there, goes 8-4, or, get the bowl game in there too, 9-4 or 8-5, whatever the case may be. That's progress from year 1 to year 2. But sometimes you feel like you need to make some tweaks to continue to head in that direction of going upwards. So again, I'm not saying that's the case right now where they're at, but just like it is every year at the end of the year, you're going to reevaluate some things, and, they'll be able to talk about it then when we get to that point. James, will Marshawn Lloyd and Rattler possibly both return for another season? Marshawn Lloyd, yes. I see Marshawn Lloyd coming back because, really, this has kind of been his first year. I know he played last year, but this has kind of been, his first year. And he gets that free year anyway from his freshman year because that was the COVID year. So this is his second year. And, last season it was tough. It was tough for him. And I think, he's going to be, man, I'm excited to think about him next season. With Rattler, I said at the beginning of the season that I thought there was no possible way. I'm not closing that door. What I'll say is this, from the conversations I've had with people close to the program, at the beginning of the year, it didn't seem like it was a possibility, but that door isn't closed. I think that's the best way to put it. That door's not closed. It has been something that has been brought up internally, and it's something that's going to be discussed more at a later time. So when I hear that, that tells me that it's not no shot. So we'll have to wait and see. But I'm kind of surprised by it, and I think there's a couple things you have to wait and see. If Satterfield is back next season, what are they going to do from an offensive standpoint that would make Rattler feel more comfortable as to why he'd want to come back to help raise his draft stock? I mean, you got to be selfish sometimes. If he's coming back here, okay, yeah, sure, of course he wants to be able to win. But the real reason he'd be coming back is because he wants to raise his draft stock. What would be different? That's the big question if you're going to come back and make that decision. Mo Kaba. Did Mo Kaba get a medical red shirt? I believe trying to remember how many. Well, he should be eligible to.
I think he should. Yeah, he should be able to.
And that stuff. Sometimes it's released internally, and it just, we'll find out at some point because there's a process where the school needs to apply to the NCAA, and it takes a couple of weeks to get back. Beamer might say something at some point if someone were to ask him a question, but sometimes it's not till the end of the year that we find out, he's going to come back. Plus, the other thing, too, is I'm using Mo Kaba, for example. Even if you do have a year of eligibility left for 2 years, whatever the case may be, injuries take a toll on you. And there's one thing that you got to ask yourself is, if I were, and I hate to do this, but I mean, I had so many injuries in college, I can't even tell you how much it kills you. You got to ask yourself, is that something that you're willing to do again? And God forbid, if you get hurt again, are you going to be okay with being back there? So, those are the questions that Mo Kaba, I'm sure they've already had conversations, his family and Beamer and the coaching staff, but I'm sure they're going to continue to happen if it hasn't already been done yet and decided. A lot of questions tonight. We might hit over 2 hours tonight, Joe. Sorry about that, buddy.
Unreal. No, it's all good, Mike.
C's get degrees, man. You'll be all right in life.
Right.
Who believes this team can get a W against Tennessee at Williams-Brice in November? Well, I'll tell you what. If they can be able to go out there, beat Missouri this weekend, get things done quicker on offense earlier in the game, because we've seen as a team, they're doing a better job in the first quarter. We mentioned the stat before. They're 5-1 under Beamer in the, year and a half sample size that we have against FBS teams we've seen since Beamer arrived. And they're 5-6, I believe, when they're either tied or outscored in the first quarter against FBS teams. 2 of those 5 wins recently in those wins, 5-1, been the last 2 games. So they're doing a good job. They're doing a better job. And that's without the offense really doing that much early on. That's not saying the offense hasn't contributed. The offense has contributed more so in the second half, but really hasn't been because of the offense, because of the defense and special teams. I don't know exactly don't do that. I don't know if that's Lady Bree saying that towards me or whatever. To who? Lady Bree, I thought he was here for 2 years, wanted to develop more. Nothing was determined, Bree, was my understanding. I think the notion was he was going to come here, and the hope was that he was going to have such a great season that he was going to be a one and done. And I think the coaching staff, and I can tell you right now, they still don't even know. And that's going to be something that will be decided at the end of the year. It could be decided in these next couple weeks, next month or so. And it's one of those things that, if Rattler wants to just go into Beamer's office and say, hey, I'm going to be back next season. So, again, that's why I was saying, we're going to have to wait and see. We're going to have to wait and see how things kind of play out. And, but I would not be as surprised if he comes back. In comparison to where I was at the beginning of the season. I'm like, no shot. One and done. And Patrick, there you go. Shout out to Gaffney. I haven't been following high school football in South Carolina as much this year for obvious reasons. I mean, juggling 2 teams, it's a little bit crazy being back up here. And I'll tell you what, Dutch Fork, or I should say Gaffney, I know they had they had a slow start, I believe, at the start of the season. I don't know if things got turned around a little bit. No, playoff football is about to start up soon. So I'm assuming Gaffney's going to be in the playoff because they're a good team, even if they've had their hiccups. But best of luck to all the high school teams getting ready for the playoff. We're going to wrap things up, Joe. I know. Intern Joe's probably like, Mike, we're at 2 hours, man.
Oh no, Mike, we're hanging out, man. It's been great.
Lady Bree, get out of here.
Yeah.
Go get your
Yeah. Do my dang homework. My mom will be happy.
Oh, they won the region title last night. Title last week. Shout out to Gaffney. Love that. We will have GC Live post-game show after the game this weekend against Missouri. So if you were to put that in a ballpark range, it's probably looking about it's a 4:00 game, Joe, right?
Yeah.
4 o'clock game. You're probably looking at close to 8 o'clock on Saturday. And Perry Orth is expected to join us. I say expected because we just got to confirm. But Perry should be on with us this week. He had a bye week. He should be ready to go. And it should be a good one. If you're going to the game this weekend, enjoy it. There's only 2 more home games left. Soak it all in. College football season, as it always does. It flies by. So, look, bottom line is this. Opportunity to get to 6 wins before the end of October. A team who 23 months ago, not 23 years, 23 months ago, 2-5 and no head coach. Big opportunity this weekend. soak it in. If you're going as a fan, enjoy it. And we'll see you guys after the game. That's the best way to put it. Intern Joe, always good to talk with you, buddy.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys for tuning on.